Hello, my dear children. I hope all of you are doing well. We are going to look at this particular chapter, which is part of the ICSE Class 9 Treasure Chest textbook. And this deals with a child, Oliver Twist, which many of you may have read. If not, you must read. This is written by Charles Dickens, easily one of the most prominent writers that English literature has seen. And this particular chapter is a short 3-page chapter in your textbook. Oliver asks for more. So this is from the earlier part of his childhood years, and it talks about his birth and his early years at that particular house where he was staying. So before we get into the story, let me just tell you a brief about Charles Dickens, the author. So this is Charles Dickens. He was considered the greatest novelist of the Victorian era. This is significant as far as Dickens is concerned. And this particular excerpt, Oliver Asks for More, it reflects Charles Dickens' own experiences and difficult childhood. So pretty much you can say there are a lot of autobiographical elements also in the way he has depicted Oliver Twist's early years. Okay, please use this kind of a phrase in your answers. And the pathos and the empathy. Pathos means, feeling sad and the kind of difficult circumstances in which Oliver Twist was there at that particular house, and empathy, or perhaps let's say the lack of empathy, are important elements. The fact that we see that the people who are running the house, Mr. Bumble, does not really show any kind of empathy for this particular orphan child. So that those are important elements. These are keywords: pathos, empathy. When I say keywords, not necessarily taken from the text, but words that you should necessarily use in your answers. And the fact that he himself had a difficult childhood, these are elements which you should include in your answers to give the answer depth, especially when we are talking about a 4-mark answer. Okay, let me just show you the kind of the covers of Oliver Twist. Look at this, that he is kind of asking for more soup. Okay, this is Oliver Twist, and you can see the other orphan children who are also at that particular house. This is again Oliver Twist with the other children. So these are all the covers of the book Oliver Twist, written by Charles Dickens. So it kind of gives you, see, I don't believe so much in the written word as in the power of the pictures. So pictures convey a lot. So if you look at our geography and history civics courses in particular for class 10, you would see that I use a lot of pictures to tell a story, because through pictures you can actually convey a lot more, because you can see the people in real, in that sense, captured, that moment being captured, and through that you can convey a story, which is why I believe in doing this. And in fact this even in the essays, I always say that picture composition is something which you should always attempt. I don't know for what reasons many school teachers dissuade students from attempting the picture composition. I personally believe it's the best picture topic to actually attempt. Let's now get into the story. I couldn't find the exact PDF, so I had to take pictures, scan the copy from the textbook, which is why it does not look so great. But in any case, you would have your book, so you should be able to manage this. Okay. Among other, because it's so tightly bound, so it's very difficult to get a very clear image. Among other buildings in a town in England, there was a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live. This was called the workhouse. Okay, so this is important. This particular word you should always use in your answers. Where did Oliver Twist live? So right at the beginning, you're not told about any characters. You're told about this particular building, because the building is what I say an extremely dark place. Dark does not mean in terms of no light coming in. Yes, there are parts of the building where no light comes in. We will see that later. But it is a dark place because it is completely devoid of empathy. There is no empathy for people, for the little children who actually are the inmates at this particular workhouse. So among other buildings in a town in England. Now please notice that this particular town is not named. And this could be anywhere. This could really be anywhere in England or anywhere in the world. We see this kind of a situation, right? So it's pretty generalized in that sense. It could be the same situation we could find in another place. There was a house for poor people who had no money and nowhere to live. So homeless and poor people. Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse. So he was born in a workhouse. Now, there are a lot of details which you need to bear in mind for your MCQs. Okay. His mother, a young woman, lay in ill bed. So you're talking about the time when he was born. A doctor and an old woman stood by her side. She lifted her head from the pillow. So very, very basic details have been provided out here. Let me see the child and die, she said. So she says that before I die, I want to see my child, my newborn child, for the last time. Oh, you must not talk about dying yet, said the doctor, right? So he's trying to give her some hope. No, dear, said the old woman, you are too young to die. So this is not the time for you to die. So you shouldn't be talking. So both the doctor and the old woman trying to give her hope and trying to kind of encourage her not to think in terms of these kind of pessimistic, not be pessimistic, not kind of, harbor thoughts of death. Okay. So they are trying to be very positive. So this is important. So before Mr. Bumble came, or rather, before Mr. Bumble makes an entry into the story, we do see that there are some people who do show some kind of empathy, which is the doctor and the old woman. So probably in this entire story, they are the only two people who we meet who have a bit of a positivity in them. So this is again important. However, the young woman shook her head and held out her hand towards the child. The doctor put the child in her arms. She pressed her cold, white lips to its face because she's almost going to die, and then fell back. So the cold, white lips, white again conveys the color going out of the face. When you're completely don't have the blood going into your facial area, that means you're kind of very close to death. Cold, white lips, that's an indication of near death. And that's what happens. She's dead, said the doctor. Yes, poor dear, said the old woman, and as she took the child away from its dead mother. Poor dear. Now this poor dear, the first poor dear is for the lady who has died, for the young mother who has died. Now, after she took the child, this thing, we can expect that, she could probably be talking also about the child. So poor dear in that sense could have been used in both terms. First for the mother, then also for the child, because now the child is an orphan in this world. She was a good-looking girl, said the doctor as he put on his hat and gloves. Where did she come from? Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So the interpretations, the way Charles Dickens has used it, both could mean for the mother, but the second one could also mean for the orphan, because the old woman, as she took the child away from its dead mother, right? So, it's literature. The beauty is that you can always interpret it differently, right? Your interpretation can be a little different from my interpretation, and our interpretation can be different from someone else's interpretation. But all of us could be right, because that's the kind of, the beauty of the literature that someone like Charles Dickens or any other author has put. Okay. Now, she was brought here last night, said the old woman. She was lying on the street. In the street, she had walked a long way, and her shoes had holes in them. So you kind of get an idea about the kind of situation that she was found in. Nobody knows where she came from or where she was going to. So nobody had any idea. Her identity is not revealed. Where she came from, where she was going to. The only thing that we know about her is that, of course, she was pregnant. She had this baby, and she had walked a long way, and her shoes had holes in them. The doctor raised the dead woman's left hand. The usual story, he said. I said that she has no ring on her finger. She wasn't married. Good night. So she was an unwed mother. Okay. And probably that was the reason why she had nobody with her. He went home to his dinner. The old woman sat down on a chair in front of the fire and began to dress the baby. Okay. So the baby was now in the care of the old woman. She dressed him in the very old clothes used for babies who were born in the workhouse. The child was an orphan born into a world which had no love or pity for him. This line is extremely important, because with this line, Charles Dickens, he is really establishing, born into a world which had no love and or pity for him. This is important. So please use these key phrases. Now, much of this is coming from Charles Dickens' own experiences, as I said right at the beginning of this video, because he had left school at the age of 12 to work in a boot blacking factory himself when his father was jailed. Okay, so what is common between Charles Dickens and Oliver Twist is a life of hardship, difficult childhood. Okay, and the story exposes essentially the cruel treatment of orphans in a city like London. Of course, here it just said in a town in England during the industrial age in the mid 19th century. So in that sense, there is a lot of commonality. What is the theme of this particular excerpt? It kind of highlights the social inequalities. I've written it down in the notes, so don't worry. It highlights the social inequalities. Again, an important phrase to use, which were prevalent in England at that time. So Charles Dickens also writing about the England of his time. So there would be that much more identification with his readers, with the kind of literature that he was putting out here in the story of Oliver Twist. So what he's showing is a sense of hopelessness, a sense of pathos, a sense of despair, right? And the fact that children like Oliver Twist were caught in this web of despair and hopelessness, right? So poverty is something which is very real. Hunger is something which is very real. The lack of light at the end of the tunnel is again something very real, that they don't see that there is any hope for a better tomorrow because of the circumstances that children like Oliver Twist found themselves in. So there is essentially the need for compassion and empathy, which is completely missing in this particular story. I mean, Oliver Twist's childhood. Okay, so that's essentially what happens. Now, the workhouse, I've already told you, it's a house for the poor people, moneyless people. Okay, now let's come to the other thing. Now, it says she dressed him in the very old clothes. This is important, used for babies who were born in the workhouse. So the beginning of the of Oliver Twist actually begins with old clothes, and it is kind of representative. It has been used by many other babies before, so it is kind of used for him again. So there is nothing new about him. There is nothing celebratory about his arrival in this world. You understand? There is otherwise the birth of a baby is celebrated, but there is nothing to celebrate in this particular case. The only person to welcome him is his old woman who dresses him up in old clothes. Okay. No one was able to discover who the baby's father was because unwed mother, or what his mother's name was. So complete lack of identity. Lack of identity is another important aspect as far as Oliver Twist is concerned. Mr. Bumble, an important officer in the town, invented a name for the baby. He chose the name Oliver Twist. Okay. And if you look at the insensitivity, or rather the completely bureaucratic approach with which he chose the name, that itself shows that there is complete lack of interest of the world in the arrival of Oliver Twist. Okay. We name the new babies here in order from A to Z. He explained when people asked, I named the last one Swabble, that is S. So the next one will be starting with T. So then this one is Twist. The next one will be Unwin. And unwin is an important thing, which is lack of victory. So the baby who will be born next or come to the work, this particular house, will be named Unwin. STU. Okay. So that is what is being decided as far as the naming is concerned. So the identity also is again something which is extremely in a very routine kind of a manner that it has been done. Okay. At the age of 9, Oliver was a pale, thin child. Now, this is the first thing that we know about Oliver. Now, the entire story has been fast forwarded by 9 years. Okay, so now we know that he was a pale, thin child. So we do not know anything from 0 to 9. We know about how he was when he was born, and the next 9 years are fast forwarded. At the age of 9, Oliver was a pale, thin child. He and the other workhouse boys never had enough warm clothes or food. So there is complete deprivation of the basic necessities of food and clothes. They were given only 3 meals of thin soup every day. So every day, that was the only meal that they got. Obviously, complete lack of nutrition. On Sundays, they had a small piece of bread. Okay, so if you get a question about what they got to eat, this is the detail that you need to give, because the soup is at the heart of this particular excerpt. They were fed in a big hall. Okay, a large pot. Now you see the contrast that Charles Dickens has kind of introduced into the story. They're all small children. All of them more or less would be of the same age as Oliver Twist, who is 9 years old. But they were fed in a big hall. The big hall kind of conveys the world in which they are. It is hostile. When it's a big hall, you kind of feel a little intimidated, right? There is a sense of intimidation, डर लगने का, of the world looking at you at the workhouse. A large pot, the big hall, a large pot stood at one end of the room, and the soup was served by the master, right? So look at the words which have been used: big hall, large pot, master. All of them conveying a sense of intimidation, all of them conveying a sense of authority. Each boy had a small bowl of soup. The boys had a small bowl of soup and no more. The bowls never needed washing because the boys cleaned them with their spoons until they shone. So it shows a complete hunger, that they would not waste even half a drop of the soup in the bowl, and they would kind of clean it up with their spoons. One day, Oliver and his friends decided that one boy would walk up to the master after supper, that is after dinner, and ask for more soup. Oliver was chosen. Okay, he was chosen, that he will be the person who will become like the union leader and go and ask for more soup, even though it was thin soup. It was not something very nutritious, but even that they wanted a little more. In the evening, the boys sat down at the tables. The master stood by the pot and the soup was served. It disappeared quickly. It disappeared quickly means it was kind of consumed very quickly. The boys whispered and made signs to Oliver. He stood up from the table and went to the master with his bowl and spoon in his hand. So made signs means go and ask for more soup on behalf of all the boys at the workhouse. Please, sir, he said, I want some more. Okay, so he demands for more soup. The master was a fat, healthy man, but he went very pale. He's trying to build a contrast. He was a fat, so he was not someone who is impoverished. He obviously ate well. He was healthy. He was both plump as well as healthy. But hearing the request, he went pale because he did not expect the boys to actually speak up, because everyone was intimidated. It was ensured that they all remained in a state of fear and deprivation. He looked with surprise at the small boy. What? Said the master at last in a quiet voice. Please, sir, repeated Oliver, I want some more. The master hit Oliver with the spoon, then seized him and cried for help, that he wanted someone in a position of authority to kind of deal with Oliver Twist. Mr. Bumble rushed into the room and the master told him what Oliver had said. He asked for more? Mr. Bumble cried. He's shocked. I cannot believe it. One day they will hang the boy, right? Now, it shows that for something like this, the extreme punishment can even be hanging the boy, right? One day they will hang the boy is a pointer to how harsh the punishment would be for speaking out, not just for asking for soup, but for speaking out to demand what they deserve, to ask for some more soup. So he's trying to say that, this is what could possibly happen to this boy if he does something like this. He took Oliver away and shut him in a dark room. What I mentioned about the darkness of the room. So it is something which is a big place, but there are those dark places out there inside the workhouse. The next morning, a notice appeared on the workhouse gate. £5 were offered to anybody who would take Oliver Twist. So they said that this kind of a boy who actually has the temerity or the courage, temerity means, to defy authority, himmat karne wali baat, to defy authority, should not stay anymore at the workhouse. So what we will do is that we will send him away. But since people may not want to take him, let's announce a reward for someone who would be willing to take him. So £5 were offered to anybody who would be willing to take away Oliver Twist. So Oliver now was a prisoner in that dark room, in that cold, dark room for a whole week. Every morning he was taken outside to wash and Mr. Bumble beat him with a stick. So you imagine the kind of childhood, where you are imprisoned inside a cold and dark room. Number two, if you get a question about what are the kind of things which were kind of imposed on Oliver Twist, staying imprisoned inside a cold and dark room, prisoner, okay? As a result of which, he will not have the company of any of the other boys at the workhouse. Number three, being morning taken away and being beaten up with a stick, right? And in any case, they would not be fed anything more than thin soup every day, right? Then he was taken into the large hall where the boys had their soup. Mr. Bumble beat him in front of everybody. He cried all day. So this paragraph is very important because it shows you the kind of treatment that was meted out to Oliver Twist just for asking for more soup. When night came, he tried to sleep, but he was cold, lonely, and frightened. So this paragraph is extremely important because it gives you a range of emotions and a range of punishments that were meted out to Oliver Twist. But one day outside the high workhouse gate, Mr. Bumble met Mr. Sowerberry. Mr. Sowerberry was a tall, thin man who wore black clothes and made coffins. Coffins is, the wooden thing, crate in which the dead people would be buried, okay, as per the Christian faith. Many of his coffins were for the poor people who died in the workhouse. Now, this is extremely important because Sowerberry making coffins, it shows that death is pretty much a part of the narrative and the life at the workhouse. People regularly died at the workhouse. We saw right at the beginning, the story itself begins with the death of the mother of Oliver Twist. So he was regularly commissioned to make coffins for those who died at the workhouse. So in that sense, death is pretty much a part of the entire narrative of this story. It's in that sense a very harsh, naked reality, right? It is, there is no attempt to kind of dress it up. There is an attempt to kind of say that, okay, he made coffins. So every time the children would see the coffins, a dead body, they knew this was part of reality. The life was miserable and death was a reality, right? I have prepared the coffins for the two women who died last night. Okay, just like Oliver's mother had died 9 years ago. He said to Mr. Bumble. Good, said Mr. Bumble. So you see, it's very strange, I have prepared the coffins. When you talk about death, for Mr. Bumble to react with good shows a slightly distorted kind of a personality. Otherwise, if someone says that, they have died and we are prepared for the cremation, would you say good? Would you say congratulations? No, you wouldn't. You would say, I'm very sorry to hear about the news, right? It's very unfortunate that he or she passed away, right? But for Mr. Bumble to say good, it kind of gives us a glimpse into the kind of person he is, right? Please note this down, extremely important. You will be rich one day, Mr. Sowerberry. Rich as a result of making coffins. And why would you make coffins if there are more deaths? So, it is rather unfortunate that someone who says that, you will become rich as, riding on the deaths of so many people, because the more the number of deaths, the more the number of coffins you will get to prepare, right? Do you know anybody who wants a boy and £5, because obviously nobody has kind of taken him away till now, even though it was put on the gate. He raised his stick and pointed to the notice on the gate. So that's how this particular story ends here. Okay. So he wants to banish the troublemaker. Who is the troublemaker? Oliver Twist. What was the trouble he created? Asking for more soup. And Mr. Bumble feels that if he kind of gives in, it will only raise, more demands from the boy. So he wants to kind of nip the trouble in the bud by kind of throwing him out and sending a message, setting an example for all the others. The others will feel that if we also do what Oliver Twist did, we will also be given the same treatment. So they will also dare not. So he wants to make an example of Oliver Twist. So that's what he's doing, and also offering money because he knows people would be reluctant to take boys from the workhouse because they would know the kind of background that they came from. So The fact that he says good, you will become rich one day, it shows it's a very morbid kind of an expression to use, right? It's a very morbid kind of an opinion that you will become rich as a result of the death of so many people, and because you will have to make so many coffins for all these dead people, right? So it's a very morbid kind of thought, which is why I said right at the beginning, this whole excerpt, it kind of paints a very depressing kind of a picture. It paints a very sad and unfortunate kind of life, a kind of life that you and I are lucky not to lead, right? We complain and crib about so many other problems in life, but look at the kind of life that young boys have had to lead because of the circumstances in which they were born, because of the circumstances in which they found themselves at the workhouse, right? So that way, this story is extremely important, a mirror to the kind of England of those days. And I hope this particular story is clear. I will be putting out in the notes also a lot of questions and answers, which will help you kind of attempt them in the examinations, how to use the keywords, how to interpret a particular thing, just like I've explained in the story, right? How to interpret a good. Many people will just gloss over this good, but this good conveys so much about this character, Mr. Bumble, right? So that's what all the question and answers will be there. So don't worry about that. Everything will be taken care of. For example, a question like, do you think the title of the story is appropriate, right? It is justified because it evokes a sentiment for that you yearn for more, that you desire more in the story, because there is so much of deprivation in the life of all these boys that even that horrible thin soup, which has no nutrition, is something that they want more, because that's the only thing they get in any case, right? So it is representative of, while they're asking for the soup, the fact that the word more has been used, ask for more, it also shows that they need that the emphasis on the need for empathy and some kind of a support that they need. So it kind of represents Oliver's desperation given the very harsh conditions of his upbringing. So the title in that sense, Oliver Asks for More, is representative of the central conflict in the story. The conflict which is represented by Oliver Twist and Mr. Bumble, who is the person in authority. The Mr. Bumble, the master, to an extent Mr. Sorbury, they're all representative of the authority, unlike the old woman, unlike the doctor, who seemed to be a little more empathetic. All right. So he decides that he will stand up to against the tyranny, but he's really not able to, because Mr. Bumble, obviously a more authoritarian and a powerful figure at that particular workhouse. So with this, we come to the end of this particular story, Oliver Asks for More. Please look at the notes and the question answers that I'll be putting up, so that it becomes easy for you to attempt any question that comes from this particular story. Tata, bye-bye, God bless.